The door creaked open just as I yanked my shirt over my head, the fabric catching on my ear. I froze, heart slamming against my ribs, as a pair of unfamiliar eyes met mine in the dim glow of my bedroom. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there. And in that split second, my life tilted off its axis. I'm Ethan Carter, 24, a graphic designer scraping by in a shoebox apartment in Brooklyn. My life was a predictable rhythm of deadlines, coffee runs, and dodging my roommate Jake's endless parade of loud friends. But that Saturday afternoon, everything changed. Jake had mentioned his older brother, Lucas, was visiting from Chicago, but I hadn't expected him to barge into my room unannounced. I was mid-change, standing in nothing but jeans, when Lucas appeared in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. He was 26, with a jawline that could cut glass and eyes that seemed to see right through me. I expected him to mutter an apology and bolt. He didn't. "Sorry. You thought this was the bathroom," Lucas said, his voice low, almost teasing. But his feet stayed planted, and his gaze lingered a beat too long. My cheeks burned, and I fumbled to pull my shirt down, muttering something incoherent about being almost done. The air crackled with something I couldn't name, like static before a storm. Jake's voice boomed from the living room, oblivious. "Lucas, you find the bathroom yet? Don't get lost in my palace." I laughed nervously, breaking the spell, and Lucas finally stepped back, offering a crooked smile before disappearing down the hall. But that moment stuck with me, replaying in my head like a song I couldn't shake. Over the next few days, Lucas was everywhere. He'd crash on our couch, his long legs sprawled out, or lean against the kitchen counter while Jake and I argued over who ate the last yogurt. He was different from Jake, quieter, more observant, with a dry humor that caught me off guard. I'd catch him watching me while I sketched at the kitchen table, his eyes tracing the lines of my pencil like they were mapping something deeper. I told myself it was nothing. I'd spent years burying feelings I didn't have the courage to face, especially not in front of Jake, who'd once called my high school crush on a guy just a phase. But Lucas wasn't a phase. He was a question I didn't know how to answer. On his third day in town, we ended up alone in the apartment. Jake had a date, leaving me and Lucas to fend for ourselves. I suggested pizza. He suggested a walk to the pier. "You ever just sit and watch the water?" he asked, his voice soft but deliberate. I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but my pulse was racing. The Brooklyn pier was alive with joggers, families, and the hum of the city. We sat on a bench, the Hudson River glinting under the setting sun. Lucas talked about his job as a social worker in Chicago, about the kids he worked with, the ones who reminded him of himself growing up lost, searching, afraid to be seen. "I was one of them," he said, staring at the water. "Took me years to figure out who I was. Even longer to say it out loud." His words hit me like a punch. I wanted to ask what he meant, but my throat tightened. I'd never said it out loud either. Instead, I changed the subject, rambling about my latest design project. He listened, really listened. His eyes locked on mine like I was the only person in the world. When our knees brushed, neither of us pulled away. The city faded, and for a moment, it was just us, the water, and the weight of something unspoken. That night, back at the apartment, I couldn't sleep. Lucas was on the couch, his breathing steady, but I felt him even from my room. I stared at the ceiling, my mind a tangle of fear and want. I'd spent so long hiding who I was, first from my conservative parents in Ohio, then from myself. Coming out wasn't just about saying the words. It was about risking everything. Friends, family, the fragile life I'd built. But Lucas, he made me want to try. The next morning, Jake was back, oblivious to the tension simmering between his brother and me. Lucas and I danced around each other, stealing glances when Jake wasn't looking. At one point, while Jake was in the shower, Lucas leaned close to grab a coffee mug, his arm brushing mine. "You're quiet today," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I wanted to tell him everything, how his presence was unraveling me, how I was terrified of what it meant. Instead, I just nodded and said, "Long night." But the truth was clawing its way out. I couldn't keep pretending. Not with Lucas standing so close, his warmth pulling me in like gravity. I didn't know it then, but that moment in my room, when he didn't walk out right away, was the start of something I couldn't stop, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. The days blurred into a haze of stolen moments. Lucas extended his stay, citing some vague work thing in Chicago that could wait. Jake didn't question it, but I did. Every time Lucas lingered in the kitchen, offering to help with dishes or asking about my sketches, I wondered if he felt it to the pull, the unspoken question hanging between us. I was drowning in it, and I didn't know how to swim. One evening, Jake dragged us to a dive bar in Williamsburg. The place was packed, all neon lights and sticky floors, with a jukebox blaring old rock hits. Jake was in his element, flirting with a bartender and challenging strangers to pool. Lucas and I ended up in a corner booth, nursing beers and pretending to care about the game. "You're not like Jake," Lucas said suddenly, his eyes searching mine. "He's all noise. You're something else." My heart stuttered. I wanted to ask what he meant, but Jake swooped in, slinging an arm around Lucas and demanding we join him for a round of shots. The night spiraled from there. Shots turned into laughter, and laughter turned into Lucas and me bumping shoulders as we stumbled back to the apartment. Jake passed out on the couch, leaving us in the kitchen, the hum of the fridge the only sound. Lucas leaned against the counter, his shirt slightly unbuttoned, revealing a sliver of collarbone that I couldn't stop staring at. "You ever feel like you're hiding something?" he asked, his voice raw. I froze, my beer halfway to my lips. "All the time," I admitted, barely audible. He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne woodsy. "Warm. I've been hiding for years," he said. Thought I was done with it. But being here, it's bringing it all back. His eyes locked on mine, and I swear I stopped breathing. I wanted to ask who he was hiding from, what he was hiding, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I reached out, my hand brushing his arm. It was a small gesture, but it felt like jumping off a cliff. He didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned in, his breath warm against my cheek. "Ethan," he whispered, and my name in his voice was a spark in a dry forest. But before anything could happen, Jake stirred on the couch, mumbling something about pizza. Lucas stepped back, the moment shattering like glass. I mumbled goodnight and fled to my room, my heart pounding so loud I thought it might wake the whole building. The next day, I threw myself into work, hoping to drown out the noise in my head. But Lucas was relentless. He'd text me random things, a photo of a dog he saw on the street, a joke about Jake snoring. Each message was a thread pulling me closer, and I didn't know how to cut it. I wasn't out not to Jake, not to anyone in New York. Back in Ohio, I'd learned to keep my head down, to smile and nod when my dad ranted about those people. Coming out meant risking rejection, and I wasn't sure I was strong enough for that. But Lucas made me want to be. On his 6th day in town, he showed up at my favorite coffee shop, claiming it was a coincidence. I didn't buy it, but I didn't care. We sat in a corner, the smell of espresso grounding me as he talked about his life in Chicago, his work, his friends, the time he came out to his parents and they didn't speak to him for a year. "It gets better," he said, his hand resting close to mine on the table. but it's health first. I wanted to tell him I was scared, that I didn't know how to start. Instead, I just nodded, my fingers itching to close the gap between our hands. That night, back at the apartment, Jake announced he was heading to a concert with some friends. "You guys cool hanging out?" he asked, oblivious to the tension. Lucas and I nodded. And the second the door closed behind Jake, the air shifted. We were alone again. And this time, there was no escaping it. Lucas sat on the couch, his knee brushing mine. "You ever gonna tell me what's going on in that head of yours?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. I opened my mouth to deflect, to make a joke, but nothing came out. Instead, I felt tears prick my eyes, and I hated myself for it. "I don't know how," I said finally, my voice breaking. I've never said it out loud." Lucas didn't push, didn't flinch. He just reached out, his hand covering mine, warm and steady. "You don't have to say it," he said. "But I see you, Ethan. I see you." And in that moment, I believed him. I couldn't look at Lucas without feeling like I was falling. His hand on mine that night was a lifeline, but it also terrified me. I'd spent years building walls, and he was tearing them down with a single touch. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of Lucas humming in the kitchen. Jake was still asleep, sprawled across the couch like a human landslide. I shuffled out, trying to act normal, but Lucas's smile hit me like a tidal wave. "Made you coffee," he said, sliding a mug across the counter. Our fingers brushed, and I swear the room tilted. I mumbled a thanks and buried my face in the mug, hoping he wouldn't see the flush creeping up my neck. We fell into a rhythm over the next few days, a dangerous dance of glances and accidental touches. Lucas would find excuses to be near me helping with groceries, asking about my art, even offering to cook dinner one night. His spaghetti was terrible, but I ate every bite, laughing when he admitted he'd never cooked for anyone before. Jake, oblivious as ever, thought it was hilarious. "My brother, a chef. We're doomed," he teased, oblivious to the way Lucas's eyes lingered on me. But the weight of my silence was crushing me. Every time Lucas got too close, I'd pull back, terrified of what would happen if I let myself fall. I wasn't just scared of coming out to Jake or my family. I was scared of what it meant to want Lucas so badly it hurt. I'd never let myself feel this way before, not fully, not without shame. And Lucas, with his quiet strength and unguarded smiles, was making it impossible to keep hiding. One afternoon, we ended up at a park near the apartment, just the two of us. Jake was at work, and Lucas had suggested a walk to clear our heads. The air was crisp, the leaves turning gold under the October sun. We sat on a bench, watching kids chase each other around a playground. Lucas was quiet for a long time, then turned to me, his expression serious. "You don't have to do this alone. You know," he said. "Whatever you're carrying, I can carry it with you." I wanted to tell him everything, how I'd known I was gay since I was 15, but never dared say it. How my parents' voices still echoed in my head, calling it wrong, unnatural. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I just shook my head, my throat tight. Lucas didn't push. He just sat there, his shoulder brushing mine, a silent promise that he wasn't going anywhere. That night, everything changed. Jake was out again, and Lucas and I were watching some terrible sci-fi movie on the couch. Halfway through, he turned to me, his eyes intense. "Ethan, I'm leaving in 2 days," he said, and my stomach dropped. "I don't want to go without knowing what this is." He gestured between us, his voice steady but laced with something raw. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. My heart was screaming, but my fear was louder. Then he leaned in, slow enough that I could have stopped him. I didn't. His lips brushed mine, soft at first, then deeper, and it was like the world caught fire. I kissed him back, my hands finding his shoulders, his neck, pulling him closer. For the first time in years, I wasn't hiding. I was alive. But the sound of the front door slamming open shattered the moment. Jake's voice echoed through the apartment. "Yo, you guys still up?" Lucas and I sprang apart, my heart racing. Jake stumbled in, clearly tipsy, and collapsed onto the couch between us. What did I miss? He slurred, oblivious to the storm he'd just interrupted. Lucas shot me a look, a mix of apology and determination. I couldn't meet his eyes. The kiss had changed everything, but Jake's presence reminded me of the stakes. If he found out, if he didn't understand, I could lose him, my home, the fragile balance of my life. I mumbled an excuse and fled to my room, locking the door behind me. I didn't sleep that night. My lips still burned from Lucas's kiss, but my mind was a war zone. I'd spent so long running from myself, and now I was running from him too. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, I realized something. Lucas wasn't just a moment. He was a mirror, showing me who I could be if I stopped being afraid. The kiss lingered like a bruise, tender and impossible to ignore. I avoided Lucas the next morning, slipping out of the apartment before he woke up. But running didn't erase the memory of his lips, his hands, the way he'd looked at me like I was worth seeing. I spent the day at a coffee shop, sketching aimlessly, trying to drown out the chaos in my head. My phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. "Can we talk?" I stared at it for an hour before typing back. Later. I wasn't ready. Not for him. Not for the truth I'd been dodging my whole life. But Lucas wasn't the type to wait. He found me that afternoon, sitting on the stoop outside our building. The air was cool, the street buzzing with the usual Brooklyn chaos, taxis honking, kids laughing, life moving on while I was stuck. Lucas sat beside me, close but not touching. "You're freaking out," he said. Not a question. I nodded, staring at my shoes. "I get it," he continued. "First time I kissed a guy, I didn't sleep for a week. Thought the world was gonna end." I looked at him then, his face soft but serious. "Did it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, small and sad. "No, but it felt like it for a while." He told me about his first love, a guy in college who broke his heart but also set him free. "I was terrified," he said, "but hiding was worse. Hiding kills you slowly." His words cut deep. I'd been hiding so long I didn't know how to stop. But sitting there, with Lucas's shoulder brushing mine, I wanted to try. I wanted to be brave. For him. For myself. "I don't know how to do this," I admitted. "I don't know how to be me." "You don't have to know," he said. "You just have to start." He reached for my hand, his fingers threading through mine. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a promise. I didn't pull away. That night, Jake was home, and the tension was unbearable. Lucas and I sat on opposite ends of the couch, pretending to watch TV while Jake rambled about his day. Every glance Lucas sent my way was a spark, and I was terrified Jake would notice. But he didn't. He was too caught up in his own world to see mine falling apart or coming together. When Jake went to bed, Lucas stayed. We didn't speak at first, just sat in the quiet, the weight of the kiss hanging between us. Finally, he turned to me. "I'm not going to push you," he said. "But I'm here. Ethan. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me to." I wanted to kiss him again, to lose myself in him. But fear held me back. Instead, I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The next day was Lucas's last in New York. He was set to fly back to Chicago that evening. and the thought of him leaving was a knife in my chest. I spent the morning in my room, sketching his face from memory, his sharp jaw, his warm eyes. The way his smile made my heart race. I didn't know how to say goodbye, not when I was just starting to understand what he meant to me. Jake, oblivious as ever, planned a big send-off lunch at a diner nearby. We sat in a cracked vinyl booth, the smell of burgers and fries filling the air. Lucas was quiet, his eyes flickering to me when he thought Jake wasn't looking. I tried to act normal, but every bite tasted like ash. I was losing him, and I hadn't even had the courage to claim him. After lunch, Jake ran to grab a cab, leaving Lucas and me alone on the sidewalk. The city buzzed around us, but it felt like we were the only two people in the world. "Come with me," Lucas said suddenly, his voice urgent. "To Chicago. Just see what happens." My heart stopped. It was crazy, impossible, but the way he looked at me made me believe it could work. "I can't," I said, my voice breaking. I'm not ready." His face fell, but he nodded, like he'd expected it. "Okay," he said, "but when you are, you know where to find me." He pulled me into a hug, his arms strong and warm, and I clung to him, memorizing the feel of him against me. Then he was gone, disappearing into the cab with Jake. I stood on the sidewalk, the city blurring around me, and for the first time, I let myself cry. Lucas was gone, but he left a hole in my chest I couldn't ignore. The apartment felt too quiet without his laughter, his quiet humming, his presence. I went through the motions: work, sketches, late-night pizza with Jake, but nothing felt right. I'd tasted freedom in that kiss, and now I was back in my cage. Jake noticed something was off, but he didn't push. "You good, man?" he'd ask, and I'd nod, forcing a smile. I couldn't tell him the truth, not yet. I wasn't even sure what the truth was anymore. All I knew was that Lucas's absence was a weight, and I was sinking under it. A week after he left, I found a note tucked into one of my sketchbooks. "Ethan, you're braver than you think. Call me when you're ready. L." My hands shook as I read it, his handwriting sharp and sure. Like him, I wanted to call, to hear his voice, but fear kept me frozen. What if I wasn't enough? What if I couldn't be the person he saw in me? I threw myself into my art, sketching scenes of the city, of Lucas, of the life I wanted but was too scared to chase. My designs got darker, more raw, and my boss noticed. "This is good, Ethan," she said, flipping through my portfolio. "It's like you're finally saying something." Her words hit me hard. I'd spent so long silencing myself, but Lucas had cracked me open, and now the truth was spilling out. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I called him. It was late, the city quiet outside my window, and my heart pounded as the phone rang. "Ethan." His voice was warm, surprised, and I nearly hung up. I miss you," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. There was a pause, then a soft laugh. "I miss you too," he said. "Took you long enough." We talked for hours, about nothing and everything: his work, my art, the way the Chicago skyline didn't compare to Brooklyn's chaos. He told me he'd been thinking about me, that he'd almost called a dozen times. I didn't want to push, he said, "but I'm not giving up on you, Ethan." His words were a lifeline, and I clung to them. Over the next few weeks, we texted constantly, called when we could. Each conversation chipped away at my fear, but it also made me ache. I wanted him here, not a voice on the phone. I wanted to be brave enough to bridge the distance. One night, he sent me a photo of himself at a Chicago bar, his smile bright, but his eyes tired. "Wish you were here," the caption read. I stared at it until my eyes burned. then booked a flight to Chicago before I could talk myself out of it. Telling Jake was the hardest part. I waited until we were eating takeout, the TV droning in the background. I'm going to Chicago, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my stomach. Jake raised an eyebrow. To see Lucas, he asked, and I froze. Did he know? Had he seen something? But he just grinned. Cool. Man. Tell him to make better spaghetti this time. Relief flooded me, but it was tinged with guilt. I wasn't ready to tell him the whole truth, not yet. The flight to Chicago was a blur. My heart raced as the plane landed, the reality of what I was doing crashing over me. Lucas was waiting at the airport, his face lighting up when he saw me. He pulled me into a hug, and I buried my face in his shoulder, breathing him in. You came, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I had to, I replied, and for the first time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We spent the weekend wandering Chicago Lake, Michigan. Art galleries, hole-in-the-wall diners. Lucas showed me his world, and I let myself imagine being part of it. We kissed under the bean, laughed over burnt coffee, held hands in the dark of his apartment. It was terrifying and perfect, and for the first time, I wasn't hiding. But reality loomed. I had a life in New York, a job, a roommate, and Lucas had his own life here. As my flight home approached, the weight of it settled over us. What now? I asked, lying next to him in his bed, the city humming outside. He turned to me, his eyes steady. We figure it out, he said. Together. Chicago felt like a dream, but New York was my reality. Back in Brooklyn, the apartment was the same, cluttered, loud. Jake's socks everywhere, but I was different. Lucas had changed me, and there was no going back. I threw myself into work, but my heart was in Chicago. Lucas and I talked every day, video calls stretching late into the night. He'd tease me about my messy desk, and I'd laugh at his terrible attempts to grow a beard. But the distance was a weight, and I could feel it pulling at us. When are you coming back? He'd ask, and I'd dodge the question, scared of promising something I couldn't deliver. Jake started to notice. You're different, he said one night, tossing a pizza crust onto his plate. Like, happier, but also weird. What's up? I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. This was a moment I'd been dreading. I could lie, keep hiding, but the words were clawing their way out. I'm gay, I said, my voice barely audible. Jake blinked, then leaned back in his chair, processing. Okay, he said finally. Cool. You still owe me for the pizza. I laughed, relief flooding me, but it was bittersweet. Jake's acceptance was a weight lifted, but it didn't solve the bigger problem. Lucas was 800 miles away, and I didn't know how to bridge that gap. I told Lucas about coming out to Jake that night, and his face lit up on the screen. I'm proud of you, he said, and I felt it in my bones. But pride didn't make the distance easier. Work kept me tethered to New York, and Lucas's job in Chicago was demanding. We tried to make it work, weekend visits, long calls, but the cracks were showing. One night, during a heated call, he snapped. I can't keep doing this halfway. Ethan, he said, I want you here. All of you. His words stung, because I wanted the same thing. But I was scared. Scared of leaving my life. Scared of failing. Scared of losing him if I stayed. I started looking for jobs in Chicago, but the market was brutal. Every rejection felt like a door slamming shut. Lucas was patient, but I could hear the strain in his voice. The unspoken question, are you really in this? I was, but I didn't know how to prove it. My sketches became my outlet, filled with images of us holding hands, laughing, building a life together. But they were just paper. not reality. One night, Jake caught me staring at my phone. A photo of Lucas and me at the bean. "You love him, don't you?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. I nodded, unable to speak. "Then go," he said. "You're miserable without him." It was the push I needed, but it also terrified me. Leaving meant risking everything: my job, my home, my safety net. But staying meant risking Lucas. And that was worse. I applied for a freelance gig in Chicago, a long shot for a design agency I'd admired for years. When they called me for an interview, I felt hope for the first time in weeks. I told Lucas, and his face lit up on the screen. "Come stay with me," he said. "Even if it's just for the interview. We'll figure it out." I booked a flight that night. Chicago was colder this time, the wind biting as Lucas met me at the airport. His hug was fierce, like he was afraid I'd disappear. The interview went better than I'd hoped, but it was being with Lucas that felt like coming home. We spent the weekend wrapped in each other, talking about the future, about what it could look like. "I want this," I told him, lying in his bed, the city lights painting patterns on the ceiling. "I want us." He kissed me, slow and sure, and for the first time, I believed we could make it. But the call from the agency didn't come. Days turned into weeks, and doubt crept in. Lucas stayed patient, but I could see the worry in his eyes. I went back to New York, promising it was temporary, but the distance felt heavier than ever. I was running out of time, and I didn't know how to hold on. The weeks dragged on, each day a battle between hope and doubt. I was back in New York, but my heart was in Chicago with Lucas. Our calls grew shorter, strained by the distance and the uncertainty. I could hear the exhaustion in his voice, the fear that we were slipping away. I was scared too, but I wasn't ready to give up. I kept applying for jobs in Chicago, pouring my heart into every portfolio I sent. My sketches were my lifeline, filled with images of Lucas's smile, his hands, the way he looked at me like I was enough. Jake, to his credit, didn't push, but he was there, a quiet support I hadn't expected. "You're doing the right thing," he said one night, handing me a beer. "Love's worth it." Man, I wanted to believe him. Then the email came. The Chicago agency wanted Minute for the freelance gig, but for a full-time position. My hands shook as I read the offer, the words blurring through tears. I called Lucas immediately, my voice breaking as I told him, "I'm coming," I said. "For good." His laugh was pure relief, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "About damn time," he said. Telling Jake was harder than I expected. He'd been my anchor in New York, my best friend through the chaos. We sat on the couch, the apartment quiet for once, and I told him everything: Lucas, the job, the move. "I'm happy for you," he said, but his voice was tight. "Gonna miss you, though." I hugged him, grateful for his acceptance, for the friendship that had kept me sane. Packing up my life was surreal. Every sketch, every book, every piece of my tiny apartment held memories of the person I'd been scared, hidden, safe. But I wasn't that person anymore. Lucas had shown me what it meant to be seen, to be loved for who I was. I shipped my things to Chicago, said goodbye to my coworkers, and boarded a one-way flight. Lucas met me at the airport, his smile brighter than the Chicago skyline. We didn't speak as he pulled me into a hug, his arms tight around me. "Welcome home," he whispered, and I felt the weight lifting, the fear fading. For the first time, I was exactly where I belonged. We moved into his apartment, a small place in Wicker Park with creaky floors and too many windows. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. I started my job, diving into projects that challenged me in ways New York never had. Lucas and I built a life together, lazy mornings, late night talks, fights over whose turn it was to do dishes. It wasn't always easy, but it was real. Coming out to my parents was the final hurdle. I called them from Lucas's couch, his hand in mine, and told them the truth. My dad was silent. My mom cried, but they didn't hang up. "We need time," my mom said, and it wasn't acceptance, but it was a start. Lucas squeezed my hand, his presence a reminder that I wasn't alone. As winter settled over Chicago, Lucas and I walked along Lake Michigan. The wind sharp, but the sky clear. We stopped at the spot where we'd kissed under the bean, and he turned to me, his eyes bright. "I love you," he said, simple and sure. I said it back, the words easier than I'd ever imagined. We weren't perfect, and the world wasn't either. But we were together, and that was enough. Chicago became home in ways New York never was. Lucas and I settled into a rhythm, our lives intertwining like the sketches I drew late at night. My job at the agency was demanding but fulfilling, and Lucas's work with at-risk kids gave him a purpose that lit him up. We were building something, piece by piece, and it felt like a miracle. But life wasn't a fairy tale. We fought about money, about time, about the little things that pile up when you share a life. One night, after a stupid argument about laundry, I stormed out, walking the cold Chicago streets until my anger cooled. When I got back, Lucas was waiting, his eyes soft. "We're not perfect," he said, pulling me close. "But we're us." I kissed him, and we made up, the fight forgotten in the warmth of his arms. Coming out to the world was a slow process. I told my coworkers, my friends, and each time got easier. Some embraced me, others needed time, but I was done hiding. Lucas was my rock, his quiet strength a constant reminder that I could do this. My parents called occasionally, their conversations stiff but thawing. "We're trying," my mom said one day, and I held on to that hope. One spring evening, Lucas took me to the pier where we'd first kissed in Chicago. The city was alive, the lights reflecting on the water. He pulled out a small box, his hands shaking. "I don't have much," he said, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring. "But I have you, and that's everything. Marry me, Ethan." My heart stopped, then soared. "Yes," I said, laughing through tears, and he slipped the ring on my finger, kissing me as the city cheered around us. Planning a wedding wasn't easy. My parents weren't ready to attend, but Jake flew out, his grin as wide as ever. "Knew you two were trouble," he teased, hugging us both. The ceremony was small, just us and a few friends in a Chicago park, the spring air warm and bright. Lucas's vows were simple, raw, promising to love me through the mess of life. Mine were clumsy, but he cried anyway, and when we kissed, I felt whole. Years later, I'd look back on that moment in my Brooklyn bedroom, when Lucas walked in and didn't walk out. It was the start of everything me truth. My love, my life. We faced challenges, job losses, family tension, the world's judgment, but we faced them together. Lucas taught me that love wasn't just a feeling. It was a choice, a fight, a promise. As I sit in our apartment now, sketching Lucas as he reads on the couch, I'm struck by how far I've come. I was a boy hiding in a room, afraid of who I was. Now I'm a man, loved and loving, living a life I never dared dream of. And it all started with a door creaking open, and a man who saw me and stayed.